Everyone has a story to tell. Welcome to DingoTalk, where we explore the experiences that make us who we are. Here's your host, Carlo Guadagnino.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is DingoTalk. My guest this week is Keven Williams, the head football coach of Methodist University of the USA South. Before we talk about Coach Williams' story to the head coaching position at Methodist, we've got to tell you some things about Methodist University. It's a private Methodist institution. It's located in Fayetteville, North Carolina, with just over 1,900 students, 79% acceptance rate, 46% graduation rate. Before aid, it's going to cost you about $55,000 to go there. After aid and financial aid, you'll be able to, it looks like for 19 grand, you can go there. Top majors are business, criminal justice, and fire and arson investigation. And again, you want to talk to the coach that's recruiting you. You want to talk to the admissions counselors. You want to get on the website. The website is www.methodist.edu. Again, that's www.methodist.edu. It's going to have all the information. Any questions that you have, those people will be able to facilitate those questions. And, you know, that's how you get your information. So, that being said, got the clerical work out of the way. Make sure you stick around for the overtime segment. We're talking about defense this week with Serenity. Coach Williams is going to talk to us about the 2023 season. We're going to talk a little bit about the 2024 season, getting ready as, you know, recruitment's starting to wind down for this class. You're getting into spring ball. You're getting into going home for your summer workouts and then coming into camp. We're going to talk about his time at Dickinson, both as a player and then as a coach. And talk a little bit about the USA South and some of the rivalries that go on in that conference. But without further ado, this is Coach Williams.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest this week is Keven Williams, the head football coach of Methodist University. Coach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to do this the way we do every week. Put you in the time machine. I'm going to take you back to 2005. Well, 2002, I would think, right? 2002, 2001?
2001.
So we're going to put you in the time machine, take you back to 2001. We're going to work our way to today. But my first question for you is, how did you find yourself at Dickinson?
Well, you know, growing up and playing in high school football in Southern New Jersey at Washington Township High School, you know, I had a bunch of schools come and recruit me as a quarterback, and believe it or not, as a defensive back. You know, I kind of was leaning towards going to maybe like a Lafayette or a Lehigh, you know, maybe to try to play defensive back, play safety. But I really wanted to play quarterback, so I kind of shifted focus and was focusing more on, you know, Division III schools. You know, actually, I was really close to committing to Kings at the time, and I went on my senior trip down to Florida. We did that, you know, at high school. We always went to Florida. And, you know, my dad had happened to call me, and this was before cell phones. So he had to, you know, get in touch with one of my teachers down there, and I called him back on a payphone. And he said, you know, Coach Bro at Dickinson, you know, called and, you know, here's the new package. He really wants you. And I said, well, Coach, I said, tell him, I said, call him and say I'm coming to Dickinson. You know, when I visited, I loved it. I fell in love with the atmosphere, the coaches. And that's, you know, kind of how I made my choice. You know, it was down to, you know, Kings, Gettysburg, Dickinson was kind of what I was looking at. And I liked the feel at Dickinson the best, with it being right in the center of Carlisle. And, you know, that's how I ended up at Dickinson, and best decision I ever made.
Now, Coach, before we go any further, I want to ask you, because that was those schools kind of all three jump out to me specifically because of the division that they're in. What is the significance of Division III? You know, you're coaching in Division III. You've stayed through Division III from your playing days all the way. What is it for you? What's the significance? What's the importance of Division III?
Well, I can tell you, and this is, you know, something I've come to believe more and more ever since I became a head coach. What I love about Division III, and I say this all the time, is, you know, as much as I love football, and I do, other than my family, it's the thing I love most. You know, I think what I've come to love more than everything else is the interaction with our players and the impact that we have on our players. And I'm not saying that other divisions you don't get that, because of course you do. But, I tell my recruits all the time, or I tell any coaches I have, it's nice that I don't have to feel like I'm running a football vocational school or a school that just focuses on football. The thing I love best is we get to impact our players' lives and everything, and
Mhm.
offer them a chance to, grow and get the most out of their college experience. Because, yes, you can make it to the NFL from Division III, but most NFL athletes are coming from Power 5 conferences and things like that. So, more of the kids that I'll ever coach will never make a future out of football. They love it and they do it because they love it. But, I have a chance to help them, get to where they want to be in life, not
Mhm.
just on the football field. So, to me, I think that's what stands out to me the most about Division III.
Um, so once your playing days are done, now this is kind of a loaded question. Is it hard to stay at your alma mater and be coaching guys that you were just teammates with a year earlier?
Absolutely. I've had a couple of my former players here do it, and I give them the same advice that my coaches gave me. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do. Like for me, I mean, I was in a fraternity with these guys. Not only did I play with these guys, these are guys that I hung out with on the weekends. And when you're a coach, you can't do that, and
Yeah.
you have to be able to separate that friendship you have, and command their respect, when you're talking about football, and when it's time to work. You're never going to turn off the relationship. That's never going to happen. But how can you separate on the field from off the field? And it's really just a respect factor, and if you have the right people around you, it can be done. You have to really just command that respect. And if you're guys that were your friends or were your brothers at one point, understand your knowledge and understand that this is your career choice, it can be done. So it kind of goes both ways. It's not just on the coach, it's on the players as well.
Mhm.
But it's extremely difficult to turn off those relationships and say, okay, it's time to work. You can't be in my office joking around all the time.
Now, Coach, when did after the 2008 season, why the decision to leave, where you had pretty much made a home for 9 years, 8 years?
Yeah, and it was my home. I never went home after college. I stayed right there with the guy who ended up being the best man at my wedding. My best friend Bob Ziegler was also another intern with me at Dickinson, and we were lived together for 4 years at Dickinson. And I loved all my coaches. I loved Coach Pro. He's one of the most influential people I've ever had in my life. But at the time, I was looking for a new challenge. I wasn't really a full-time coach at that point, even though I was technically an offensive coordinator and calling
Yeah.
plays. I was still technically an intern, and I was lucky enough that the guy that was our part-time O-line coach, we called him Bud Evanson. His son, Dave Evanson, was the offensive coordinator at Methodist, getting ready to take over the head coaching job at Methodist from Jim Seipold, who was getting ready to retire. And David actually come seen our playoff game at Dickinson when we played Wesley, and really liked the offense that I was running, and came up to Dickinson and talked to me a little bit and was like, hey, I'm going to have an opening when I take over as the head coach. I want to bring you down as my offensive coordinator. And I trusted the family.
Mhm.
Honestly, I trusted Dave's dad. I never visited Methodist. I never even really looked much up about it. I just trusted Dave and knew I wanted a new challenge in my life, and honestly get health benefits. I was getting older. I was starting to, date my wife. Well, at the time wasn't my wife, but who ended
Mhm.
up being my wife currently. Um, and that was it. And that was probably the second best decision I made in my career, was trusting Dave and his dad and that family that this was the right fit for me.
Now, and I'm going to pull out a sheet here just so I make sure I get it right. What was your first impressions of Fayetteville?
It's funny. It was nothing like I expected. When I first got down here, I heard a lot about, the old Fayetteville nickname was Vietnam because of Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty,
Mhm.
and the military base. And, it didn't have the greatest reputation, I guess, before I got here. But it reminded me of a big city feel. And as a kid growing up near Philadelphia, and Camden and some of the bigger in Atlantic City, some of the bigger
Mhm.
areas in New Jersey and Philadelphia, it reminded me of that. It was big. It had everything. It had, malls and bowling alleys and, all these things. It was close to Raleigh. It was close to Charlotte. I kind of fell in love with the city right away. So that was kind of my first impressions.
And then for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about Methodist. What are you guys getting into down there? What's a day in the life like on the campus?
Methodist, it's gone through a lot of changes since I got here in 2009. And it's, sometimes I think back and it's like, wow, I've been here since 2009. I've been here 15 years. But it's funny to see when I first got here that when we didn't have a football facility or they were just building it. And now it's, one of the nicest things I've ever been a part of in our facility. To, we have a grass home field and we never had lights. And 3 or 4 years ago, we put lights, and I was a part of the first ever night game here at Methodist. This past year, we had the first ever night homecoming game, here at Methodist. And, the things going on around here, they're just building a new medical center. They just got a grant to, open up a new Methodist School of Medicine at the Cape Fear Valley Hospital here in town. Our university president, our administration, our board of trustees has done an amazing job of, updating Methodist every year. I don't even know if that's the right word, because it's not like it was out of date or anything. It's just we've gotten something new every year. And I know I've talked to other coaches or other people I know or experiences I've had where sometimes it feels like, where's the money going? What's new coming in? And the players and the students think that. But I've never heard anybody ask that here. So, the new things going on and what we do with student-centered focus here, and our new president, Dr. Worden, who came in a couple of years ago, is huge on that. And I really think that's what's kept me here so long, because it's always just keeping up with the times is probably the best way I can describe it.
And you're the end of your answer there. You beat me to my punch to my follow-up question, which was, you've been there for 15 years. What has kept you coming back year after year? But you gave us that. So
Yeah.
In 2016, you become the head coach. What was that experience like? And how have you changed anything about the culture of the team, or have you just, as you said, updated as the years have moved on?
What it was like, it was surreal. I was 32 years old. I knew I always wanted to be a head coach. For most of my career, I was an offensive coordinator, at least a play caller, for most of my career. And when, Bob McAvoy, who was the AD at the time, and Dave Evanson, who was the assistant AD at the time, is now the AD. When they had called me and told me they were going to make a change at head coach, and they, wanted to, offer me the job, I turned to my wife after I hung up the phone after saying, of course I would, there's no way I was going to turn it down. I turned to my wife and I said, I hope I know what I'm doing. I hope I know what I'm getting into. Because again, I've only been 2 places. I've been at Dickinson and I've been at Methodist. I haven't been at, 10 different schools and seen all this stuff. I say all the time, I wasn't Nick Saban or, or Dabo Sweeney or any of these coaches that seem like they have all the answers. I didn't really know. And my wife said something to me that kind of stuck out to me. And I've tried to live by that every day. And she basically said, you got to trust yourself and learn every day. And that's what I've tried to do. And, that's kind of what I've tell my players. I tell everyone, listen, if you guys have ideas, I'm going to continue to learn, continue to grow and build this program. Just like to answer your second part of the question, Methodist has always had an amazing tradition. I've gotten to know a lot of the alumni. I've coached under the, 2 or 3 coaches that have been at Methodist, whether it's Jim Seipel or Dave Evanson or CJ Goss right before me. So I knew kind of, what was built here and what this place was built on, and customer service, or first class, recruiting and, whatever words you want to use. But I wanted to kind of put my own spin on it and, come up with a motto or a team goals that we were going to strive towards. So I came up with, our guys trying to become what we call the gold standard of college football. And I want to be the program that other programs look at and say, not only do they win on the field, not only do they run a great program, but their guys graduate on time, they run a clean program, everybody can look at our program and there's not anything that they say, I don't know about that.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what we've been building towards. Obviously, building towards winning on the field, but I say it all the time, and not to jump ahead, but we were 2-8 this past year after being picked to finish high in the conference and coming off, 3 high winning seasons. And people were asking me, well, coach, why did you have a losing season? Why did you lose? Why did you lose? The more I thought about it, the more I stopped answering the question, because I don't think we lost. Yeah, we lost on the field and we have to fix that. And that's, not a problem, or excuse
Hmm.
me, a problem that we can fix. But, we also, all of our guys are graduating. We had the highest
Yeah.
team GPA that we've had since I've been the head coach. We had over 60 guys that had over a 3.0. We didn't have anybody get in trouble. None of our guys did anything wrong. So all those things make us a winning program.
Hmm.
And if I can put my head on the pillow at night and say those things are going right, then to me, I'm doing something right.
Absolutely. I think that's one of those other things when you talk about Division III, that as we've been doing this show, that's one of the things that we really get to recall is that, most of the coaches, wins on the field are very important. And that's the business side of it.
Mm-hmm.
The men that you develop, the character that comes out of that, the community building, the academics. And at the end of the day, that's why these kids are in school is 4 years, COVID year excluded. You get to, 4 years, you walk out, you go get a job and you have a degree, and people can look at that degree and go, wow, you stuck it out and you accomplished that. So,
Mm-hmm.
Coach, talk to us about the USA South. So
Okay.
we've talked to Huntington's coach, we've talked to Belhaven, we've talked to a couple other coaches in your conference. What makes the USA South? What is it, the USA South? What's the importance of it? What are some of the rivalries? And how do you guys feel about coming up north and playing some of them northern schools?
The USA South, first and foremost, if you ask, it depends on the sport you ask, because the USA South is huge.
Mm-hmm.
They recently had to split it into two because there were so many schools that were in the USA South. Now, only, 9 play football.
Yeah.
But I think there was at one point 22 or 23 schools in the USA South. So they split it into the USA South and the Collegiate Conference of the South, with the southern schools like the Huntingtons and LaGranges and
Mm-hmm.
them. So it covers a wide variety of states. To me, it's an amazing conference because we get to travel. We get to play a lot of high academic, high end, high character teams. You mentioned some of the greats. I mean, Coach Turk at Huntington is done an amazing job. And I know Belhaven's coach just left, but they've only been in our conference for a year
Mm-hmm.
or 2 years, excuse me, and just won it this past year. It's highly competitive. I mean, in my 15 years here, let me see if I can recall. North Carolina Wesleyan used to run our conference. When I first got here, they were really good. But since then, there's been us, Maryville, Huntington, Belhaven, all that have won conference championships.
Yeah.
So it's not, a conference dominated by one school. Yes, Huntington's kind of had a stranglehold the last couple of years, but it's been a very, very competitive, conference, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
The schools down here, we all kind of recruit against each other. We all have that mutual respect, but the rivalries of it. I mean, Methodist, our big rivals have always been Greensboro and North Carolina Wesleyan, and now building up with Brevard because they're in-state schools.
Yeah.
But in football wise, since I've been at Methodist, I've always looked at the Huntingtons and the Maryvilles as our biggest rival because those are the schools that we're chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the schools. Like in 13, we tied with Maryville as a conference champion, and as I said, Huntington up until this year has kind of dominated our conference, and those are the schools that I've looked at as our biggest rivals moving forward. And then, in terms of the northern schools, I mean, with all my ties to the north, I would love to, get up there and play the Dickinsons of the world, or even, get up into the PACs and
Mm-hmm.
the Pittsburgh area schools with the W&Js who we played before.
Yep.
I played Waynesburg when I was at Dickinson. We played Grove City, Carnegie Mellon. It's just tough because of the conference size we have. We only played now 2 out of conference games. And Guilford's always our week 2 because we played Guilford now for every year we've had football, even though they're in the ODAC, but they're another North Carolina school. So it really only is week one. And we've
Yeah.
always kind of had an ODAC opponent, whether it's Shenandoah or Newport News Apprentice. So that's the only real reason we haven't kind of expanded up north.
Now, I've asked this question to a couple of the coaches that like I said, that we've had from the South. Is there any problems that you run into when it comes to scheduling the one non-conference game, or with that connection to the ODAC, is it kind of a little easier for you to get a team on the schedule, whereas maybe some other teams struggle a little bit to fill those non-conference games?
Yeah, I think with our location and our connection to the ODAC, I think that has probably the biggest reason why we've never really struggled. The Huntingtons and LaGrange are so far away from some of these schools, it might be a little tougher for them to find those out of conference games. They might have to travel a little bit more. Plus, with now I think it's 3, if not 4 of the current ODAC schools used to be in the USA South, meaning Shenandoah, Averett, Ferrum.
Yeah.
Those all used to be USA South schools when I first got here. So, I think that some of the old traditions between Methodist and those schools kind of keep us wanting to play each other. So I think that's why we've never really struggled to fill those games.
Makes sense. Put us in the room with a recruiter, a parent, and you've given us a lot of information that I think is in those conversations. But what are you telling a parent that maybe puts them at ease that for the next 4 years you're taking care of their child?
I never used to talk like this when I first became a head coach, because again, when I first learned recruiting, it was all about how do you sell the recruit, how do you convince the families that you're going to take care of them, as you say, and that this is the best place for their young man and all of that. The more I became a head coach, the more I started to think, why do I want a recruit to come here because I'm a good salesman or I can convince them of something? What I always say to recruits and parents, and I think this assures them, but again, that's not really the goal. I tell them that I don't want anybody to come here because I'm a good salesman or my coaches are good salesmen. When we recruit somebody to Methodist, we tell them everything about Methodist University. We show them everything about the school, dorms, academic buildings, whether I think they're great or I think they need to be updated. Because at the end of the day, I want all my players to come here because this is where they want to be. And this is where they feel like they can be the most successful. As much as my ego wants to kick in and think I can land every recruit I talk to, it's not reality. I joke all the time that if I landed every recruit that I wanted, we'd have no one to play because every person in the country would be on my team. So, that's not the reality of the situation. But it is about these young men and these parents finding out everything about this place so they know exactly what they're getting into, so we can avoid guys coming here and then all of a sudden, I didn't know this or I didn't know that, I'm leaving. I tell my guys all the time that doesn't help them at all. And there's a stat out there that it's over 50% or 60% or 65% of the students that leave their first university never end up getting a degree, and that's a scary stat. And I don't want that for any of my players, whether they're, my star athletes or not. So, that if you were in a room with me, you would hear me say that every single day to every recruit that's ever come on this campus.
Coach, it's interesting as we get on this recruitment topic and the stat that you just put out there. I think there's another stat that I saw this week about the transfer portal and how that number just daily, if not weekly, goes up by the thousands. A lot of kids sitting in the transfer portal. What, as a coach, when you see a guy in the transfer portal, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, and how do you think the transfer portal has affected recruitment and Division 3? We'll stay in our division.
Gotcha. Well, the first thing I look at, and again, I know everybody's got a different theory, and I'm not saying my theory's right or my theory's wrong, but I try not to look at the transfer portal very often. Now, I say that after coming off our quarterback, who was our quarterback for 5 years, transferred from Fairmont State. So, I'm not against the transfer portal. Of course not. He was great for us. But, if I'm going to recruit a kid out of transfer portal, number one, I'm going to want to talk to his former coaches. If I can, I want to talk to his high school coaches, because at the end of the day, I'm not saying there's not good kids in the transfer portal and there's not valid reasons, because there are. But there is also, like you said, thousands of people that are in there just because they're, again, I don't want to generalize, but the grass is greener on the other side. That's what they're thinking. And those are the kind of kids that, to me, are not going to stay here. And that's not really what I'm all that interested in. So, I want to know who he is. Did we recruit him coming out of high school? Maybe that's the case. And if that's the
Okay.
case, then we know the young man. Those are the kind of kids that I would rather go after in a transfer portal rather than just looking up a random kid that I thought was a good player, but I don't know much about him. So that's kind of
Mhm.
what first crosses my mind. Um, and when it comes from Division III, how transfer portals affected us, I think a lot of times our kids are naive to what the transfer portal really is. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that affects Division III athletes because you see it on ESPN. You see, big time Power 5 quarterbacks saying, I'm transferring, I'm entering the transfer portal. And then they end up going to another Power 5 school and it looks all great. But what
Mhm.
I try to tell our guys is, yeah, that's the handful of guys that it's great for, and I'm glad for those student athletes that can get a great situation for themselves. But there's thousands of others that it doesn't work out for, that'll never play football again. That could have been great football players if they
Mhm.
stayed at their university, and that's what we try to open up our guys' eyes to. I tell our recruits all the time, I'm proud of a lot of things we've done in this program, but I can count on the number of fingers and toes I have, how many guys in my 9 years we've had enter the transfer portal, and it's not many. Just because I think our guys know what they're getting into if they come here,
Yeah.
and I think that should be the key when it comes to the transfer portal. Again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm bagging on it because I'm not, because there is certain situations where it's great,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I think people, if I could give any advice to any college student, is be careful what you're actually looking for. And the grass isn't always greener on the other side. In fact, we say around here that the grass usually is not greener on the other side.
That's very true. It's very true. So, Coach, you touched on it a little bit, the 2023 season.
Yeah.
Just now that it's in the past, we're moving on to 2024. But what is the overall? What was the takeaway from 2023, and what are we excited for going into spring ball and camp in 2024?
The takeaway from 2023 was, for me, and when you have a season where you struggle on the field, you start to reflect on a lot. And I don't know if you ever really have an answer unless it's an injury or something like that, but it really wasn't that. I mean, we returned very, very similar team than we had the couple years previous. As I said, we returned our quarterback, our tailback, our two amazing defensive ends, and all these players that were all conference and all world players for us. And we just didn't play well. And when I started to really, really have our end of the season meetings and talk to our coaches and talk to the players, I think the thing that probably stuck out to me the most, and again, at the end of the day, this is my fault. I think we got complacent. I think we thought we were building something so long and for so long for over my 8 years here, and building towards a winning on field program that when we got there and we had the undefeated season, during the COVID year and then went 7-2 and then, had a couple good years in a row, I think we thought, okay, we've gotten to this point, but we stopped pushing. We
Yeah.
stopped challenging ourselves and stopped challenging our players, to strive for greatness. And, a lot of my players are actually the ones who opened my eyes to this because even they were, talking about, coach, yeah, I think we need to do more in the spring and we need to get back to doing some of the hard things that we did, not just assuming that our guys understand how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been the most excited about. With Division III, there's not much that goes on in the spring until you get to spring ball. You got to rely on guys to be motivated to come in and lift on their own and do these things on their own. And I got to tell you, there are so many guys in and out of this building, more guys than I've seen in any of my years.
Hmm.
Again, I'm not taking attendance or doing anything because you're not allowed. But just the guys we see in here and the guys that are dedicated to coming over and talking to recruits and things that I encourage them to do it, but I'm not forcing them to, but I don't have to with this group. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most is our guys understand what a losing season looks like now, I think, and they don't ever want to go through that again. And that's probably what makes me the most excited moving forward into 2024.
So what I'm hearing is that there's a very hungry group down there in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
You're right.
All right, we're gonna make note of that. Before I forget, I know that tomorrow is a special day, so I want to wish your son a happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I very
Um,
much appreciate it. Turned 9 years old. Getting old, I guess.
um, Coach, the last question before we roll into the random five. A lot of murmurs, a lot of rumblings. I guess I won't call them murmurs. A lot of rumblings going through Division III after this season. 32 team playoff system. Not the best. The best teams aren't all getting into the tournament. How do we fix this? Do we expand the season? Do we extend the playoff system? I've heard a story that it's a possibility that the national championship will happen in January after Christmas time as you extend to a 40-team playoff. Where do you fall on all that?
It's a fine line. Do I think our playoff system is perfect? No. Do I think it's better than most? Absolutely. Every conference has their conference champion, and I understand there's a lot of subjectiveness when it comes to who gets those at-large bids and and what conferences are deserving, the strength of schedule, strength of opponents, all these things. And I don't think you're ever going to find a perfect system. I don't think there's one out there. And no matter what you do, you hear pundits talk about it all the time on when we expand to 12 in the D1 model. Well, the 13th team is going to be made. Just like right now, the 5th team is made. Yeah. So you're always going to have somebody that's upset, and rightfully so. It happened to us during the COVID year, when it was, us and then trying to figure out who we were playing, Huntington, Brevard, who beat each other and trying to, there's no perfect answer. There's really not. But you got to, pick a system. You got to stick to it, and everybody's got to buy into it. But I never think there's anything wrong with adding more teams into it, though. Because there's a lot of great deserving student athletes out there who we just talked about earlier that, aren't getting paid to do this. They're doing this because they love it. And any chance they have to play more football can't be a bad thing. I think you got to be careful when you get into going to January, though, when you get into leaving for break. And now you're talking about a lot more money to keep, students in the dorms and RAs and all athletic trainers. And there's a lot that goes into it. But, if that's what the NCAA decides, I'll get behind it and, jump right in with both feet and hopefully get to experience that here in the years to come.
Well, Coach, I hope we're sitting here next year talking about you going through the dance.
That'd be great.
So we've come to, this is what this is my favorite part of the show. I just think it's a different, it's not so much the football side. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
I used to answer that question as Ireland. That would have been my answer in the past, just because I'm, coming from an Irish Catholic background, and that's just how I grew up. But again, I've never been to Ireland, so I can't really answer that question. I think if you ask my wife, she would like to, probably live in New Jersey because that's where her family's from. I want to be. I guess I can answer that question by saying I want to be somewhere where the community. I know the community. I'm not just a face in the crowd. I can walk into Walmart or a corner store and I know the local people, or I can walk into a pizza shop and I know the owner. I want to be around people that, I know, just because to me that's fun. I like to talk. I like to meet new people. I like to hear from other people. So, that might be a bad answer to that, but I guess I can get that at a couple different places in the world.
I had one of the first coaches I asked that question to say I'd go to a mountaintop, not a specific mountaintop, just a mountaintop, fish and pull off the grid at a mountaintop, and I'm good. And you know what? Hey, that's where you want to be.
That wouldn't work for me unless there was TV up there or streaming services, because I don't think I could live without that. But
Coach, what's the most important lesson that you've learned over your career?
Wow. Most important lesson, if I could pinpoint into one thing, I would say, know how you treat your student athletes. And again, going back to, and I don't want to keep repeating, but going back to, you better give your student athletes something more than a football experience so that they can look back 20 years from now when they're talking to their own kids about you and about your program, and they can say that you helped set them up for life.
Yeah.
And if you can answer that question as a yes, every time you're talking about what you did for your student athletes, you can put your head on the pillow at night and know you made a difference no matter what your record is or where you go or where you're coaching. And, you'd be able to leave this world smiling, knowing that you made a difference.
I like that. See, now that was a good one. That was an answer there. If you weren't coaching, what would you be doing and why?
Okay. If I wasn't coaching, I would be in, honestly, HR.
Okay.
I went to school to be a business major. I thought about going to work for my father, but I was never a great worker with my hands. He didn't pass that gene on down to me. But I wanted to, I always loved business ethics and again, understanding different scenarios, understanding different people's side of views and points of views and, taking into account what's right, what's wrong, what are you allowed to do. So I honestly think I'd probably work for an HR department somewhere, and help people and still be able to meet new people and talk to new people. But yeah, definitely something in the business world. But I've always been able to, when I've been asked that question recently, I've been able to say HR probably somewhere.
What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Probably the best compliment I ever received, I could probably say, is that I understand that there's more than one side to every story. All right. The best I'm able to see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
And that's, I've been told that a few times in my life. And to me, that encompasses a lot of what I do. So I would probably say that. I mean, yeah, I've been told I got a good beard and, all that, but
it is a very nice beard. I have to give you that.
When you're really thinking about it, when it comes to my life and my job and, same thing that I try to use as a father to my two kids and as a husband, that would probably be the best compliment that anybody has given me or could give me in the future.
And then, on the other side of compliments, there's another side to compliments. That's the insults. What's the best insult that you have received?
Oh man. The best insult, I don't know, but it is probably just, I don't know if my father has put it right or used to put it right that, we got that short fuse temper in the Williams family. And he used to use some funny firecracker jokes when he would talk about, if our temper got to that point. So probably something along those lines. I won't say it to the general public, some of the language he used, but, so I'll keep it to that.
It's a family show. It's a family show.
There you go.
Coach, the last question we ask every coach that has come down to talk to us here on Dingo Talk. Was there a question that you were expecting me to ask you? And if so, how would you have answered
it? Was there a question? I mean, you did a great job of answering, asking a ton of questions and things that I enjoy talking about. But I thought probably you were going to ask about the success during our COVID season, because a lot of people did ask about that, and it was such a challenging time. And people ask, Coach, how did you go undefeated and, win Methodist Coach of the Year that year, with not even being able to meet with your kids and split practices and all that. And how I would have answered the question is I had to rely on the people around me, and I had to trust my players. I got real familiar with Zoom like we're on now. And, I had to really, really think outside the box. And that was part of the compliment, I guess, earlier, is being able to see the bigger picture. And being able to envision, okay, I can have offense on one field, defense on the other, because we're only allowed to have a certain number of people. And because I had that, plus our administration trusted me to do the right thing, even though we didn't have, I don't even know if there was a right answer because no one knew exactly what was going on during COVID. But they believed that we could do it. And that's why we were successful, I think, because we were able to do a lot of things where a lot of people couldn't. So that would probably be my answer to my question. I usually get that question, during the COVID time or about the COVID time.
Well, Coach, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with us. I know that this is with recruitment still going on and spring ball right around the corner, and it's a busy time. Like I said earlier, I hope that a year from now you and I are having a conversation and it's, well, hey, we took a run in the dance, or maybe we end up, you guys end up in Salem. I mean,
that'd be awesome.
And you heard it first. I was the first one that was on the train there. So
You're right. I'm definitely going to be sending you that message when we get to that point and say, hey, let's set up another conversation here.
absolutely. For those of you that are sticking around, you know what comes next. It's Overtime with Serenity Brown. This has been Coach Keven Williams, the head football coach at Methodist University, and we will be right back, Chuckleheads.
What's going on, Chuckleheads, and welcome to Overtime with Serenity Brown. That's Serenity Brown. I am Carla Guadagnino. We just finished up with Coach Williams of Methodist University. First off, I want to start by saying thank you to Methodist, Coach Williams, the coaches in the USA South, and all the coaches that have been part of this show that have taken the time to, one, do the interviews with us, two, share their interview and get it out to their audience, and three, just for the support that the Division III coaches have shown towards me and the show. So, that being said, defense, since we got a little way off track last week and you didn't want to be here, we're going to break this down. Hopefully this goes a little smoother than the offensive side of the ball, although I feel like you're going to tell me that these guys all do the same thing as well, because their job is to tackle people. It's literally.
Yeah, I mean, that's job. It's a little different. The whole point is defense. So, yeah.
So here's the broad overview. Everybody on defense's job is to tackle. Here's the lesser of the broad overview. There are certain people you don't want them to be the ones making a tackle. It's just bad news if they are. Okay, so we'll start up front. There's two of the basic formations. There's either a 3-4, which means that you have 3 linemen, 4 linebackers, and then your secondary, which are going to be 4. It's going to equal out to 11, right? You also have a 4-3, which is take one of the linebackers out, move them up into a spot on the line.
Like, just reverse it.
Pretty much. For this one, for what we're doing today, we're gonna walk you through a 3-4, right?
Okay.
Defensive end. So they're lined up.
Front line on the ends.
On the tackles. Outside shoulder of the tackles most of the time.
Okay.
Offensive guys to tackle. Nose guard. Nose tackle. Defensive tackle. Nose guard's not really afraid. It's very rare that you have a true blue nose. Most of them are just defensive tackles. They're a little bit bigger bodies. Their job is to clog a hole. Go find somebody, take on a center and a guard, take on guard and fullback, draw people into the, so that's your defensive line. Now in a 4-3, the opposite one we were talking about, you would just bump this guy over and you would bump another tackle down into there. You'd have 2 defensive ends, 2 tackles. Outside linebackers, 2 outside backers, okay? TJ Watt, I'm trying to think of somebody else that, off the top of your head that you would know. Alex Highsmith, and I'm using that because as a Steeler fan, that's the games that you've seen, and that's the defense that you've run with. They can cover.
I know TJ Watt. I don't think I know the other one.
He's the opposite side. So you have a right side and a left side. They can drop into coverage and play you normally want to play them into the flats, or you want to play them like into that little in-between routes. Same thing on the other side. They'll blitz, but they also have outside contain and run. So that means don't let anybody outside of you, force everything back in. Everybody's there. You know what I mean? So those are your outside linebackers. Your middle linebackers. Normally some of the craziest people that I have ever met in my life like to play this position because most of the time they get told, go find the football. Go find the football, hit the guy with the football, go find it.
Hit the guy with the football.
They're also normally the guys calling out for the linebackers in the line. They're normally the ones calling out the signals, calling in the play. Coach will send them a signal for the play. They're calling it. They're making the pre-snap reads before we get into the play. I noticed this guy over here. I noticed this there's a motion, stuff like that. Then you get into your secondary. Right in the left corner, they're out there with the wide receivers. They're wide receivers. The joke in football is that they're wide receivers that can't catch, so they got put on defense. I was one of those guys. I should not have been, but I was one of those guys that played in the secondary. You have a free safety and a strong safety on your back end, okay? So your free safety is normally going to play like a center field position. They're going to cover all of this back in here, right? Corner will cover here. Corner
So,
will
like,
cover
is that
here.
like if someone like slips through, they're meant to like get them?
It depends. If they're in a man, like if they're man up, they're going to man-to-man cover somebody. Normally, you'll have this safety picking up a tight end, picking up a slot, picking up the extra receiver in the bunch.
Okay.
If they're playing zone, this is what I was drawing here. You're going to have this zone here. That guy's going to be in charge of that area, right? This safety here, in charge of that area. This safety here, or this corner here, in charge of that area. Now this guy, the strong safety, normally run stopper. Can cover people, but you normally have them, they're an all over the place. They're going to make a bunch of tackles. They're going to make, they're going to be manned up with a running back, a tight end, more or less out of the backfield, stuff like that, that like you said, if they slip out, you're going to go get that guy, okay? And I'm trying to give this as basic as possible, and this is not my strong point, which I guess we're learning. Had I stayed with that education degree, maybe I would not have been that good of a teacher. So I said there are some guys that you really, if you, as a defensive coach, if you could avoid having them make the tackles, it's a good thing because it's bad news bears if they're making the tackles. That's these two right here. You don't want them making tackles.
So, what are they? They're just meant to like hold someone off. Not
Well, they're
really.
covering. They're going to cover not that they can't make tackles. It's just
but
if this guy's making a tackle, that means this guy let out one of the outside linebackers let outside contain break. This is your spill.
if this guy's tackling, this guy's not doing his job.
Yes and no.
In a simple form.
Yes and no. It's called a spill. So if the running back were to spill over, that's your last line of defense.
I understand the premise of it. When you start going into the flat and the
So think about the flat this way. Guy comes out, when a running back comes out of the backfield.
Okay.
The flat is like this. So this is the offensive line. Think of this line right here. This is the offensive line. The flat is getting out into open space, but you're
kind of going parallel to the people that's there to go around them.
Yes, you're getting out into space where if I get you the ball out here, it's a one-on-one. Maybe you got 5 yards before anybody's near you. You know what I mean? Whereas some of the things I was saying about the linebacker, I had a coach, Ryan Lee, he used to call it the skiff route, which just basically means the shorts, the hooks, the curls. Skiff was one of them fancy words. It's a word that means word.
A synonym?
Yeah. So that's the basics of defense. Then you get into your blitzing and your stunts and all those things, which we can get into later on.
I would say if we get into that, we'll do that like on another
that one I would probably
have
to have a board and be able to. And I mean, even this was just to give you.
This honestly, it kind of helps.
It's an easier visual when I'm saying something.
I know you guys can't see it, but I can see it.
I can show it to you guys. It's not great. My at-home coaches will love this. This is the bare minimum of what I was just trying to give a visual aid to the person that is doing their best to learn football. So, and we're all visual. I'm a visual learner, so that helps me.
I hate that I'm not really a visual learner.
You're a doer.
I'm a doer.
I can't help
but
you.
I can't do
legally the NCAA won't let me. They sent me a cute letter that says you're not allowed.
The most I can do is video game. So
also, or I guess lastly, if you are so inclined, please share, tell a friend to tell a friend, and check on your people. I think we don't say that enough. I mean, not that this show is necessarily about mental health and all that, but check on your people. Check on your people and make sure you know who your people are. So with that being said, I think everybody should have a good week. It's second week without football.
How you doing?
It's okay. The USFL comes back next week. More football for you. We can learn it as it's going. We'll see you next week, Chuckleheads.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Dingo Talk. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. For more info and to contact the show, you can find us on Twitter @DingoTalk.